Hello and welcome back to If This Is True. And today we're going to tackle, and it really is quite boring, but it does need tackling, the national grid. Once upon a time, Britain led the world in many industrial areas, actually including the national grid, which was first established in the 1930s. It's quite old and rickety, but it was a groundbreaking effort to unify the country's electricity supply under public ownership. And over the decades, it did evolve into one of the world's most advanced grids, when we were good at stuff and we led things. But in the 90s, it shifted to ownership by private investors. We privatized it. And yet that did lead to lots of debates at the time about whether that was suitable and what the profit motives were. But the government believed that introducing private ownership would lead to more efficient management and operation of the electricity sector. Now, I do want to put in here, I'm a big fan of the free market, and I absolutely believe in people establishing businesses and making money from it. I have no problem with that. But I do have a huge problem with things that humans actually need to survive being held by private ownership, because it never really does lead to efficiencies if there's no competition. And of course, there would be no competition. There's only one grid. And so, as usual, instead of this privatization favoring the public, it just favored the very large shareholders, which include now BlackRock, which holds approximately about 6% and a bit of National Grid shares. I know that sounds not a lot, but it makes it one of the largest shareholders. With the rollout of Ed's bonkers net zero renewable energy policies and the massive increased requirement for electricity that Britain has, we're about to see our entire island crisscrossed with thousands of new pylons. Even in the face of massive concerns about health, environmental impact, and the fact that, is that really the best technology? What about underground cables and stuff? Nope. We're going ahead with pylons. And the very same investors that are invested in the grid are also invested in that renewable energy sector. Oh, look. They get 2 bites of the taxpayer cherry subsidies. Brilliant. Ed Miliband has proposed a massive expansion of the grid. Now, I don't disagree with that. It should be updated, but it's a private company, and I think the private shareholders should pay to upgrade the grid, don't you? I mean, after all, they're the ones making £4 billion a year. That's a lot of money. Anyway, Ed's had lots of advice on this upgrade. Connected parties like Emma Pinchbeck, the former CEO of Energy UK, has become lead at the Climate Change Committee, one of the people who advises the government on energy policies, including the future of the grid. Now, I think connections like this really blur the lines between independent advice and industry influence. So you're influenced by your huge shareholders who own the grid saying, ooh, we need subsidies. And you're influenced by the energy company saying, ooh, we need an improved grid, both of which truly benefit from any of these upgrades. So what's the plan then? What is the plan? Well, simply put, thousands of miles of overhead pylons will be erected to connect offshore wind farms, solar farms, data sheds, and millions of cars and other renewable sources to that national grid, with the aim to meet the ridiculous net zero target by 2050. And the initial price tag for this pylon expansion is estimated at tens of billions of pounds. Not only that, but construction could actually take 20 years. But wait, didn't we just spend billions removing pylons to preserve our countryside only 15 years ago? And wasn't there a scientific body of work that recommended cables over pylons because of the potential for cancers in children? See, they couldn't make up their minds if there was a connection or if there wasn't at the time, about 15, 20 years ago. So they decided to err on the side of caution, and we would put cables underground rather than erect pylons. Why are we taking 2 steps back? Well, the government claims they're cheaper and faster to install compared to underground cables. Overhead lines cost about £50,000 to £150,000 per mile, whilst underground cables can cost 5 to 10 times more than that. But long term, underground cables are far better value for money because they last longer, they're more resilient to storms, and obviously, you can't see them all over your beautiful landscape. But to a private company, especially one getting massive government subsidies and bill payer subsidies, longevity isn't great. And it doesn't matter anyway, because someone else is always going to pay for your refit. Far better to use technology that needs replacing more often, because you'd get more money more often, right? Perhaps that's why lobbying efforts by influential investors have pushed for cheaper overhead pylons despite the broader environmental and social costs, because it will always make them more money. So where will these pylons come from then? Because British steel industry has been gutted. So we're importing those from China then, made using coal then. Yeah, that's a carbon footprint the government doesn't really want to discuss. And then there is that massive cost, because this upgrade won't come from government coffers alone, which is your tax money. It will also come from us in excess charges on our bills. Energy bills are already skyrocketing. Britain has the highest electricity prices in the developed world. So how much more are we going to need to actually pay? Well, a lot. Because although the National Grid reportedly made profits of over £4 billion last year alone, they don't want to pay for it all. No, we have to. If other countries can bury cables, we should be able to. And the answer is that we can, but it just isn't as profitable for the investors. Germany and Norway did do that, however. They invested heavily in underground cables because of those long-term savings, environmental preservation, and they're also less vulnerable to storms and weather. They require less maintenance, and they, of course, preserve the beauty of the land. We're just being shafted, as usual. And this isn't just about pylons. It's about the future of our energy systems, because the grid, already under strain from renewable energy, electric vehicles, and the push for smart meters, don't forget, BlackRock also own over 40% of the smart meter market through their investments. Brilliant. Love that company. We're also on our way to an outdated, overloaded system that doesn't benefit us at all. So we have to ask ourselves, with all of this upgrade, will we not find ourselves back to square one in another decade or 20 years after we've electrified everything that moves in the country? Yeah, we really will. It's a never-ending gravy train, and it's one that Ed Miliband has been lobbied to choose the cheapest possible route, which just doesn't benefit us at all, but it significantly benefits the people who currently own it. And if this is true, we are covering the countryside in steel, risking children's health, and letting private companies rake in profits to save the planet. It was short, but I think it was deadly. Anyway, let me know what you think. Put some comments below. Please subscribe and like, and I'll see you next time on If This Is True.